Hi, Christine. Okay.
Hi, how are you?
Thank you for being patient.
Of
Uh,
course.
I'm good. I guess a minute until I'm gonna be also just kind of jotting down notes, like last time. I know we're a little few minutes late, so I apologize for that.
No
Okay.
worries. We are resilient today.
That's right. All right, let's go ahead and start. And then, like I've said before in the past, and also for our viewers and our future viewers, welcome tonight to Orthodox Women's Ministry, our special lecture series with Dr. Agaibi, who's been such a great blessing and honor to us in our ministry and has been guiding us and fulfilling us and helping us enrich our lives with understanding of resilience and supporting our needs, alongside with the differences between burnout and depression, all the things that we are struggling, especially as Orthodox women, but as humans overall. I do often say this, but especially in our post-pandemic world. But I know all of us are, have our strengths and our weaknesses, and we are kind of struggling in our own ways. And I know Dr. Agabi has encouraged us, especially from last week's lecture, to really know our strengths, know our journey, and know to reach out and to ask for help and for support from your community, from your family, your friends, and so forth. And so I encourage all of you to go ahead and look at our past lectures, which they will be uploaded to YouTube shortly. They are on our YouTube channel as well, and thank you, in our Instagram channel. And look up for updates because we will be working with Dr. Agabi in the future, which we're super excited about. We're going to be working on different projects and collaborating. And as always, the ministry is for all of us, for you, for me, as we work together as a team, as women globally. So please give us your feedback, your thoughts, your comments if you want to get involved. I know a few people have also reached out, which I'm really excited as well, because this ministry is for everyone. And of course, through the lens and for Orthodox women and by women. And so, no further ado, Dr. Agabi will be giving her final series lecture tonight, just for this series for now. And she's given two powerful lectures. Again, I encourage you to go back and listen to when you have the chance. Tonight she'll be speaking about spiritual and psychological resilience for the Orthodox woman. And so I think this is such a powerful topic just to kind of wrap up our series, because a lot of times we might identify, I guess, the struggle, but we definitely need the resilience and the tools to move forward. So to no further ado, Dr. Agabi, take the floor. Thank you so much for being with us again tonight and on a Wednesday night and evening again with so many people as well as a therapist, everything that you do for our community. So thank you again.
Thank you again for having me. This has been a wonderful series, and I also look forward to our continued collaboration. So really looking forward to that. And today is a really, again, nice way to kind of wrap up our series in a kind of hopeful, uplifting kind of way, because in the very first session, we talked a lot about burnout, what that looks like, how to kind of identify burnout, because from time to time, experience that. And we talked about loss of meaning, kind of cynicism that spills over into every area of our life, which can be really a struggle to come back from. And we talked about burnout and how this can be somewhat religiously or spiritually kind of based, but can also psychologically be based too, from just overwhelming ourselves with the things that we have to do. In the second lecture, we kind of, after dipping low, we wanted to come back up to baseline at least, and kind of returning back to wellness a little bit. We talked about greater balance in our life and trying to understand the different areas of balance and creating an environment of balance. And there were 8 areas of balance that we talked about. Today, we're going to hopefully go above baseline. So we got up to baseline last time, going above baseline and kind of how to obtain resilience and talk about the science of resilience. It's an actual science, but how to thrive beyond our baseline and obtain resilience, especially as modern Orthodox women that are doing many, many things and doing lots of different tasks. So the modern Orthodox woman is trying to maintain traditions that have survived 2,000 years and bringing it to our families and children and homes and things like that. And meanwhile, we're also trying to juggle careers and raising a family and maintaining relationships and juggling many, many different things. So that can contribute to burnout, but we want to talk today about resilience and how that this requires flexibility and adaptation, while still adhering to our roots and still developing these wings to grow and to grow further than just our baseline. So the essence of resilience, if you want to talk about it, or hallmarks of resilience, is about this adaptability and the ability to change and grow with challenges when challenges come. And yet we're still, again, adhering to the values that we hold and the values and traditions that have been passed down for thousands of years. Resilience is often a word that's thrown around. You probably have heard it quite a bit, especially after like a disaster, a natural disaster, or a hurricane, or something like that. When something like that has occurred and someone has exhibited extraordinary adaptation, then we say they are, resilient and they're adapting extraordinarily to this extraordinary struggle. While this seems like a modern concept, and it kind of is, and I'll talk about that in a minute, it's a concept that's been actually discussed for thousands of years by philosophers. It's in the Bible, by poets, by people who have attempted to understand how do we grow from adversity. In our modern world, it's actually become a science, a branch of psychological science that has been studied for 40 years or so, since a little more than 40 years, since 1975 or so. And I've been personally studying it for over 20 some years now. It's been my field of interest and study, both in practice and in research. But it's simply really simply, and then we're going to get into the kind of nuances of what it is, but it's simply a muscle that we can grow and develop over time. So at times we may not feel very resilient and things may really be a struggle or a challenge. And that's okay, because it's about ups and downs, of course. But that is precisely the work that kind of I do, is to help people identify their unique strengths and use them for greater resilience, because we are each unique. So resilience is something that we have in us, but sometimes we need to activate it or awaken it in order to utilize it, so to make it grow. And we don't even realize sometimes that we have it until we really need to lean on that skill. Sometimes it's kind of been snuffed out by experiences, by people in our lives that may be, not the best people around us or things like that. And so we have to rekindle the embers of where this resilience is, and kind of this is where the science of resilience comes in. Resilience really requires us to be bold and courageous. We have to step outside of our comfort zones. We have to step outside what people may have told us is our limitations, or struggles and circumstances have placed us in these boxes. But we have to see, as modern Orthodox women, all that God has meant for us to be, and to kind of walk into that purpose and that with courage and boldness. And the character I'll kind of focus on today, but there are so many in the Bible, as a modern woman, is Esther. She was a modern, godly woman in her time, and she was faced with an impossible situation where her entire people could have been killed. But she was a woman with a voice, and she had a position, and she decided to use that strength with voice and with courage to help her people out of this situation, to help herself out of this situation. So God has the power to change difficult situations and challenges into blessings. Our prayers and our voice do matter. And when we have that voice and we come into using that voice and we are courageous, we can stand in front of any person in any difficulty. And we can, bring favor onto other people as well in that process. Even in a situation that may seem hopeless and difficult, God will fight on our behalf, and he will respond to our prayers and to us using our talents and our strengths, which I'll talk about today. So we want to take action knowing that God is supporting us and is faithful to deliver us out of difficult situations. Again, Esther was bold. She was resilient. She relied on God and on her strength of courage, which is actually a character strength, which I'll talk about towards the end of this today, in a time of great challenge and great struggle. And it could have been, the peril of her people, but her resilience was able to save her and her people. So resilience does require boldness. We're also at a kind of a juncture this weekend with Pentecost, this coming, Sunday, again, another time when the disciples were bold to go out and preach all that had been kind of put into them the last 3 years that they were with Jesus. He poured onto them so many lessons. And so this Pentecost is another time where we can talk about boldness and things like that. So we will see in these stories that come up that boldness and courage is one of those character strengths that we need to use. And so resilience is in us, but we have to kind of tap into that resilience to make that muscle grow. And some of the research that talks about resilience talks about it as a lifelong muscle building process. If you're trying to build muscle, actual body muscle, you may have the muscles. We all have the muscles, but we need to tap into it with a personal trainer, with some skills, with some specific training activities to get those muscles to be their full potential. And that's kind of what resilience does. That's kind of the work that I do. And so again, at times we may feel resilient, other times we may feel like we're not. But if we look back at our lives, at least that's what the research tells us, if we look back, we should see this overarching theme of challenge and resilience, challenge and resilience. And it has many characteristics, at least that's what the science tells us. Lots of research was done. And it's both a process and an outcome, but the bottom line is that we have to persevere to see it happen. Again, in terms of the research, philosophers have talked about this. The book of Proverbs talks about falling down 7 times and getting up 8. I believe there were some philosophers that said that same similar quote to that. And we've heard the quote of that which does not kill me makes me stronger. But we have to kind of persevere to see these things. We have to persevere to see these things unfold and happen. And when we talked about burnout in the last couple of weeks, we talked about recognizing, first of all, that we have an issue, that we have a problem, that we're experiencing difficulty and challenge. Last week, we talked about reversing that process by learning what areas we needed to balance in, what areas we were not balanced, and how to return to that balance. And again, today we're talking about going beyond that and thriving. So it's really about recognizing first, starting to reverse things by looking at what's happening in your life, what's not fitting, what's not balanced, what areas we need to work in. And research tells us we actually can respond in one of 4 ways when we have a challenge or a difficulty. Some people just succumb to that difficulty and just collapse, and their functioning is severely impaired. And while, that happens, there's still treatment for those kinds of things, and coaching and actual therapy and treatment to get out of those kinds of situations. Some people will survive and just continue to function. They're just kind of on autopilot. They'll continue to function. It may be impaired. It may not be impaired. They may be just an autopilot, but they're functioning. The third thing is some people will recover. They'll dip, like we talked about before, and then they'll get back up to baseline and stay at baseline. In our talk today about resilience, we really want to talk about the people that thrive and prosper beyond even their original level of functioning, even where they were before this tragedy or crisis or trauma or difficulty or whatever it is. And, research again tells us that everyone is going to go through some stressor at some point. Could be transient, just something really brief, a brief stressor and you're over it. Other times it could be chronic. It could be years or decades even. And we even have examples of that from the Bible, like we talked about last time, Joseph, for example, decades of challenge, or Job, a season of change and challenge. But we can achieve resilience if we focus on things like our spirituality, self-regulating ourselves on those 8 areas of strength or 8 areas of balance. If we focus on meaningful things in our life, if we focus on good relationships, good friendships, loving relationships, that's really important. The problem is that when we experience a threat to our wellness, we want things to be better now, immediately, as quickly as possible. We live in this microwave world. We want everything right now. We want it fresh. We want it hot. But the Bible doesn't talk about the modern woman or in general as people, that we have to be having patience. We have to persevere. We have to wait and grow in that process. Perseverance, the purpose of perseverance, that waiting period, is to build that muscle. It takes time to build muscle. It takes time to learn the skills that we need to grow and how to develop. So that doesn't happen in a microwave. That happens over time and over different challenges and things like that. It teaches us to learn. It teaches us to grow. It teaches us how to apply that knowledge into our current situation. And then it teaches us how to move towards this level of thriving. Our entire goal is to get to this thriving. So when I've done some research on people that have been resilient, they say that through this process of the challenge that they went through, they have learned to take care of themselves and others. They've learned what self-care looks like. They've learned what they need. They've learned how to be kind to others that are also going through a struggle. They don't always have to be on the go. They've learned to have a different perspective about their difficulties and prioritize what's important. They've learned what gratitude and meaning is. And again, that stuff does not happen in a microwave. That stuff takes time, and it's a slow cooker instead of a microwave. It really teaches us some things. The perseverance themes, again, that I've heard in research that I've done is people will say, I'm going to fight this. I'm going to do what I can to move beyond this and to move forward and to grow and to let go of negative things and let go of what's holding me back, to let go of what ifs. And they've learned to rely on God and rely on having their faith restored. So perseverance is really important. And there's obviously verses in the Bible that talk about this. Consider it pure joy when we face many trials by the testing of our faith. It helps us to mature and to be complete and not lacking anything. So there's verses that talk about these things as well. In terms of stages of resilience, so we've talked about people that succumb, people that are just on autopilot kind of thing, other people that dip below baseline, come back up to baseline, and then people that thrive. And even the people that thrive, they also go through stages. They don't just wake up one day after their trial and then suddenly they're resilient. They initially can go through a deeply denying phase, and it's almost like a defense mechanism to protect our mind from the difficulties and the challenges that they're experiencing. Hopefully they don't stay in denial too long, because we actually have to face the struggle and the challenge in order to be able to cope from it. But initially our brain, because it's so difficult and so challenging, it might go through a denial phase. After that, once you've gone through the grief process and you realize you've had this challenge or this loss, you don't want to succumb to it. So that's the first kind of inclination, that I want to be resilient. I don't want to succumb to it. I've had a realization that I've had a loss or a challenge or a difficulty. And then after that, I start to search for meaning. And that's really the beginning of resilience. It's a sense of search for meaning. It's about how do I attain connection with both my past challenges, but also have hope for the future. So resilience is about not ignoring the past, not ignoring the challenge, but holding both simultaneously. I have a challenge and I can be resilient. It's both simultaneously. You're not denying the difficulty or the challenge that you've been through, because that would be a disservice to all this learning and growing that you're doing. So it's the ability to hold both simultaneously, the challenge and the difficult, painful time. And actually, our some neuroscience studies have shown us that our brain is flooded with positive neurotransmitters when we are perseverant. And so the more we are perseverant, the more we have dopamine and other of the endorphins that kind of push us through to be even more perseverant. So resilience is actually the same way. It is a chain reaction that once it starts, it just snowballs. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until we're able to solve the problems that we have and not just see them as insurmountable. So in a time of perseverance, we should be looking for the opportunities that come out of this challenge. We should savor and slow down and trying to figure out what the lessons are. Again, this is not going to happen in a microwave. We can't have things happening quickly and fast. It doesn't work that way. And we should also look at things as nothing is insurmountable. With all the challenges we've seen of characters in the Bible, as severe as they were, Job and Joseph stand out in the Old Testament, St. Paul in the New Testament, they never saw it as insurmountable. In fact, St. Paul was asleep in the middle of a prison. And so nothing is insurmountable. If we look to how we're going to challenge this, how we're going to change this, how we can turn fear into faith and into action, then we will learn how to grow. And also at the same time, give ourselves permission to be human, that sometimes we're going to feel sad or weak, and this is where we need to rely on Christ and his strength. His strength is made full in our weakness. So perseverance leads to resilience. In the world, we will have tribulation, but take good heart. I have overcome the world. And so it's important to know that there will be challenges, that we're not just going to coast from birth to death and there's not going to be any challenges. Even Christ experienced challenges. So they're there, they're present. But resilience is about bending with those challenges, kind of like a tree that bends in the wind. If it doesn't bend, it's just going to snap in half. So we have to bend. We have to reshape ourselves. It's not going to break us if we try to learn from this situation and again, bring about action. Again, resilience is like a chain reaction. Once it starts, it keeps going, and there's absolute research on that area as well. So as Christians and as modern Orthodox women, we have two big benefits in our corner, which is our faith, and also the power and strength of our mind to kind of reshape our surroundings. So if you're going through a challenge right now, ask yourself, what is this challenge that I'm facing? Do I blame anyone for my problems? Research tells us if we have something called an internal locus of control, and I feel I have control over this situation, that I can maneuver it, and I can have the ability to adapt, then I will more likely be resilient, rather than blaming everybody else and not looking at myself. Also, what purpose is coming out of this situation? Is there meaning out of it? What insight has this hardship given me? Have I learned anything out of this hardship? Is there something that came out of it? Do I feel challenged, or do I feel in despair? Do I feel hopeful, or do I feel discouraged? How do I respond in terms of problem solving? Or do I just give up and I can't brainstorm and think of new solutions about how to deal with this situation? And do I feel stronger, or do I feel weaker? So now let's talk about actual definitions of resilience. Again, it's a word that's thrown around a lot. The research really started in the 70s, like I say, though it's been talked about for thousands of years. But the research scientifically started in the 70s with how do children that are growing up in difficult environments, whether it's abuse or whether it's neglect or whatever, how do those children, they called them hardy children. They did not succumb to their difficulties, and how did they do that? So they initially studied children. Next, researchers studied war veterans, and they found specific characteristics in those war veterans, whether they found some sort of meaning out of that difficulty and that challenge, but they always had a purpose to look forward. So it's an upward spiral of our well-being. It allows us to see more than one possibility. Yes, I'm in a challenge, but that is not the only thing. I'm not in a bubble, and that's the only problem. I can look outside that bubble and see the world more optimistically. I can look inside myself and see my coping skills and how I can apply those. If I'm given lemons, how do I turn that to lemonade? What are my skills that can make me turn those lemons into lemonade? And so it is feeling good and having these emotional buffers to ward off symptoms of things like burnout and depression. It's optimal coping over a period of time. That's what defines resilience. It's a lot of behavioral tendencies that allow us to have resilience. It is adaptive functioning over a long trajectory. And so again, you may not feel resilient at times, but again, over the full period of our life, we will be able to be resilient. So it's the process and outcome of adapting to difficult challenges, especially with our mental processes, our emotions, our cognitions. We have behavioral flexibility, and we're able to respond to these internal and external demands. So resilience is the ability to adapt and proceed successfully despite challenging situations. Again, that does not mean that I just put on rose-colored glasses and everything in the world is puppies and rainbows and everything is beautiful all the time, because we all know it's not. But it's the ability to have this conscious choice almost to experience everything, the full spectrum of human emotions, and not to be consumed by them at the same time, and to thrive despite them. So the American Psychological Association tells us that we should make connections in order to be able to do these things, to avoid seeing things as insurmountable. Again, we can overcome things. It takes time to be able to do that, but we can. We also have to accept that sometimes difficulties and challenges exist. We have to create goals and start moving towards those goals with decisive actions. We have to take opportunities to have self-discovery about who we are, and almost nurture kind of this positive self-view of ourselves. We have to keep things in perspective. Is this going to be a problem forever? Usually not. Even the worst of situations end, and the tide changes, and life kind of moves on. We also have to have this kind of hopeful outlook and take care of ourselves in the process, because again, one of the very first things we do is we neglect our own mental and physical well-being, which is not good. We also, no matter how old you are, whether you're 5 or 105, you've gone through some sort of challenge, and you're here today to live to tell about it. So how did you do that? Look at the different steps that you uniquely took yourself to get out of that difficulty, and apply similar steps to the current problem that you're in. So you're deconstructing past situations where you had challenges, and then reconstructing them based on the current situation that you're in. And that means using your own strengths, using your own support network, using your own talents, whatever you did to get out of that situation, you have the ability, you've done it before, and you can do it in this situation again. First, one of the first things that suffers again is our self-esteem when we're going through a difficult situation. So we have to find ways to relieve our stress to increase our self-esteem. When I give this talk in person, I usually show a picture of a person with their head in the sand. Most people try to run and hide and avoid all their problems. As soon as a problem hits, I'm just going to push it aside. I'm going to procrastinate. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to pay attention to it. Unfortunately, when that happens, the problem grows. It doesn't disappear. And so research tells us the more that we face things head on with support, with help, with a therapist, with a counselor, with a coach, with someone, with family members, and you're encouraging these secure attachments and facing it, you'll be more likely to recover from that difficulty and that challenge. Unfortunately, stressful events can deplete social support, so look for avenues where you can increase your social support and also start to reframe your thinking. Is there another way to look at this problem? Is there another way that I can understand this? Is there another way that I can get out of this situation? So in doing so, you are creating meaning out of difficult situations, and you're not ruminating about the problem, you're ruminating about solutions. So you're constantly looking for a way to fix, as opposed to this is the problem, this is the problem, this is the problem. So you're trying to identify yourself as a survivor, as someone who can cope, and that reframing is what helps you to kind of grow and to move forward. Again, there's been identified 24 character strengths in people all around the world, and these are strengths of our character. They're positive personality traits that are in every human on the planet. And these character strengths, we can determine what they are and find the unique makeup of the character strengths that you uniquely have, and then apply that to your current problem on how to fix that problem. And so this is the ultimate kind of path, because even though everybody has all 24 character strengths, we don't have the same makeup of those 24 strengths. So my highest is not the same as your highest, is not the same as the highest person in Europe or Asia or Australia or whatever it is. So my unique mix of character strengths is what allows me to be resilient for me. And again, we can identify those uniquely in every individual and use those strengths. And this is kind of also the work that I do as well, to help people to kind of use those unique strengths to help them to become more resilient. This is different than talents. These character strengths are kind of grounded in morality, grounded in, they're rarely wasted because they're something that we show up with every single day. But sometimes we don't realize that we're using these strengths, but the more that we tap into them, the greater and more fulfilling life and more resilient life we will have. Again, we want to stop negative thoughts and use positive thoughts. There's been identified 10 positive emotions that we can use. One of them, for example, is gratitude, and a lot of them overlap with the fruits of the spirit. So again, there's something that's been talked about for 2,000 years, and now science is catching up to saying the same or similar things, that these 10 positive emotions, or the 9 fruits of the spirit, help us to develop resilience and help us to mindfully pay attention to the good and to grow from that perspective. These 10 positive emotions have been found to help us to problem solve better when we use them, and can get us out of a difficult situation much faster than if we were thinking negatively. Another one of those is curiosity, for example, is being curious and looking for new solutions and how to problem solve. Research also tells us that we should savor. Again, it's not going to happen in a microwave. It's going to happen in a slow cooker. So we have to slow down and focus on what is actually good in our life. Even that's what gratitude is about. Even though there's challenges, the Thanksgiving prayer, for example, in the Coptic Church is prayed in every situation, good or bad, funerals or weddings or baptisms or somebody in the hospital, we still pray the Thanksgiving prayer. So in that slowing down, we can figure out the things that are going well. And again, research, I've talked about this before, that research tells us when we slow down and savor a good conversation, a good dinner, a good cup of coffee with a friend, stopping to smell the roses, our mind kind of banks these positive experiences, and we can withdraw from that bank experience when we're going through something negative, and that helps us to stay positive. Obviously, we should always make little improvements on yesterday. We need to be more balanced, not be complacent, but always be action-oriented, practice gratitude, and focus on those positive emotions and using our strengths as well. And in doing so, we should be able to focus on all the different areas of resilience. So we should be physically resilient, eating well, sleeping enough, taking care of our physical body. We should be focusing on being calm and having good emotions and emotional regulation, using positive emotions. That's the psychological part. From a spiritual perspective, we can again focus on our values and beliefs and lean on those when things are going in a difficult way, and focus on what your beliefs and values are. Because again, we are, as modern women, we are doing a lot, and it's more important to turn away from the burnout, realize when it's happening, and kind of take out the things that are not working and replace them with more resilience and character strength, ways to help us to kind of grow and be the best that we can be, as fulfilled as we can be. So that's what I had for us for today.
I'm like waiting for more and more.
We can do more.
I think I've said this. Thank you so much, Dr. Agaibi. I think I said this last week, and just while you're talking, I'm like, this should be another series. This should be another. There's so much
Absolutely,
richness that you offer. And I was just talking to a friend as well who chimed in last week, and she was like, every line is like another lecture. Like it's just, and which is so golden. So thank you again. Oh my gosh, I was writing notes as well, and sorry, I'm in like a public place because of my situation, but no, thank you. I know so many women have thanked me personally, and through the ministry. So I just want to reiterate that, and you're just like, such a gift, because this is such a, I don't say overlooked, but such a topic that we need constantly. And like how you framed it with resilience, and how you connected that this has been in existence for thousands of years within our tradition, within other traditions like philosophers and other things, but also scientifically. I think that was really fascinating.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Of course.
I'm gonna first see if there's any questions. Okay, there's one.
And those character strengths can be, a thing in and of itself, or the positive emotions. Those in and of themselves can be talked about for, weeks and weeks, an entire series on their own. And so, even when I talk about those with clients, that brings a lot of richness too, because we each have our own unique makeup, and that helps us to be resilient.
Yeah, no, I loved, oh my gosh, especially, I think there's so much we could do, especially, and we'll definitely be talking, and we'll be collaborating more.
Absolutely.
And we'll bring more to you for the women's ministry, because exactly. And I think the things that you mentioned, I mean, like I said, you mentioned so many things that were like, wow. But the things I would love to, I guess we could also talk about in the future, is what are those 24 character strengths? And what are those 10 positive emotions we could tap into? And I think if I understood you correctly as well, you're saying the 8 kind of spheres, like if we focus on resilience, that kind of I guess affects all of those parts, particularly, kind of, in a way. Like, I know you're talking about different aspects, the physical, the spiritual, and so forth.
Yeah, so the 24 character strengths have been found again in people around the world. And they're just the way that they're part of our positive traits, positive personality characteristics. They're how we show up every day. But we don't label them necessarily. But they're positive parts of our character, and they're different than talents. So talents are things like, I can play the piano, and let's say, for example, but I stopped practicing, let's say, for 5 years, and now I've lost that talent. These are not things that you can lose. They're infused into everything that we do, and you cannot lose them. But we don't always lean on them either. And if we lean on them and we recognize where they are and how we can put them into our everyday lives, our work, our occupation, our finances, our spirituality, that helps that part to grow and become more resilient. So that's how that is applied. And again, I give people some assessments on how to do this, several assessments, and then tap specifically into those character strengths, their top 5, their top 10, and then what areas are you struggling in? Let's use our resilience science and our strength science to help them to grow. So that's how we work with people individually, and also in groups and businesses and whatever is needed, but can be beneficial for the Orthodox woman who is burned out doing a million things as well.
that, just listening to that, that in itself is mind blowing. Of course, from an Orthodox, like our faith-based perspective, we believe that God doesn't give us more than we can handle. We believe the promises, like you mentioned, and we believe that Christ says there will be tribulation, but we could overcome as Christ overcame. But it's mind blowing you say that, because, oftentimes we, I'll say again, like, just the environment we live in now is, with all the challenges and recession, whatever, people are going through, and you just feel like there's a lot of feelings of defeat. So the fact that you say that there are those characteristics that are inherent in us, it just amplifies and validates what we believe, of course, as Orthodox Christians, is that we are all born and made in the image of God. We've been given those traits and those strengths.
Yes.
But it's just, yeah, I just want to say it's mind blowing, because it just, my brain is just going in so many directions. Like, I know a lot of us, like you mentioned, the 4 responses to difficulty, and a lot of people succumb.
Yep.
And I know I'm definitely guilty. Sometimes you're just like, you just want to hide your head in the sand. Sometimes it gets too much, especially as a mother. I have 2 little ones. I want to hide my head in the sand a lot. So yeah, that's phenomenal. I think that I would love to hear more about that. I'll go to the 2 questions now. I know there's one in the so, because I know I could chat forever, asking you things. But let me go to the first question, and then I'm going to go to the public question. So the private question was, is resilience the same as long suffering? Oh, that's interesting.
So I see more perseverance as long suffering, and you need to be perseverant in order to become resilient. I've done research on people that have survived the Holocaust, for example, and they talk about periods of time where they were not resilient, and that's to be expected. You're going to go through some dark times, but in that perseverance, you again learn skills. You learn what is important. You learn what is not important, and to let that fall off. And again, you cannot do that in a microwave. That has to be takes time to marinate over you and to figure out what you need and how to grow from that situation and where your strengths are and how you've been using them. So there are times that you are not going to feel very resilient, but across the lifespan, it is a muscle to grow. It is a muscle to grow. And so you need some training on how to do that. And that's work that I do, but it's also important that you do it yourself, for yourself, to understand that there's multiple areas of who I am. How can I grow those different areas to help myself to grow and become as resilient as possible? And it's holding both simultaneously. This is a challenge. I see it as a challenge. I'm not putting my head in the sand. I'm facing this head on, and I can have strengths and be resilient. I'm both.
Yeah.
I'm holding both together.
Yeah. I love that. I love that also. Just going back on what you're saying, that people also don't always, who are resilient, don't always feel that, because I think, again, and we've touched upon this in the past lectures, where, oftentimes as Christians, we're like, oh no, we can't feel anger, or we can't feel sadness. Like we can't. But it's sort of embracing and channeling those emotions healthily, like even, a lot of the church fathers talk about the darkness, or the dark night of the soul. And even, of course, like we talked about Christ in Gethsemane, like drops of blood. This was really intense. Being Christ himself, right? So I think for me, I know for me personally, a lot of times saying, you know what, acknowledging like, no, this is actually really hard. This is dark, but let's keep on going. And I think, I know personally, again, I don't know who else can relate to this, but I tell this to my husband as well, just acknowledging like, yeah, this is really hard. This is dark, but let me embrace the darkness, and then let's see how we can move forward. I think for me, taking that pause is sort of healing, if that makes sense.
And that's, again, part of that savoring. You got to slow down, and unfortunately it's going to hurt, but you got to feel everything to know where you need help, where you need assistance. In the running and hiding from it is only going to be helpful for so long. And then we have to actually face it, problem solve, lean on our strengths, of course, lean on God. And that's how we will get through that difficulty or that challenge. Yeah.
That's, I think, another thing we could definitely talk about, how to problem solve and how to constructively. That's another great thing, but we'll do that. We'll talk about that for the short-term future. Let me go ahead and read it's in the public comments. How important is it to create the environment for thriving psychological or psychosocial social part of our health? Oh,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
We
Thank you.
we
That's
have to
really good.
have a good environment around us, of course.
Mm,
We are not meant to live in a bubble all by ourselves. In fact, in a lot of work that we do, we look at the family, we look at the environment that's around you, whether it's a work environment or a family environment or relationships. Again, those are part of those 8 circles, right? That we have a social environment that contributes to our well-being. If that social environment is not healthy, if it's toxic in any way, that can bring us down. Good company is talked about in Proverbs as well. We need to have that good company. So we need to have people that nurture and fill us as much as we fill them. And we're not meant to kind of do this alone. And so it's really important that we are iron sharpening iron, and kind of in one accord, living all in harmony, and that is filling each other up, pointing each other's strengths out if we don't know them, and helping to encourage one another in that regard. So a good social environment, again, that was one of those 8 circles that we talked about before, the 8 areas.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I think definitely that's huge, like you mentioned, and I think that's something, a lot of us sort of struggle with, especially as we get older, and again, when we're our busy lives and burnouts and things, but that's something I totally agree with, and I think for me, I can't emphasize enough that the social aspect, and I think that's part of one of the things that Christ has given us, the church, to have the family, the body together to help us. And he talks about this, right? And St. Paul talks about this. And I think that is essentially family and the community that builds us up, and, all those things that St. Paul talks about, building each other up or leaning on each other, or, putting the burdens on each other in the book of Acts as well. And I think that is in my opinion, I guess in some cultures is lacking, but I think if we as Christians, especially as Orthodox women, coming together in this platform and our local communities, that in itself is just so crucial. I know it's tough. It's tough. We've moved, and again, I hate saying post-pandemic, but I could see that in a lot of people struggling with that.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you for emphasizing on that. Yeah.
Yeah, we have to lift each other up. We're not gonna make it alone. So
Yeah.
we have to lift each other up and support each other.
Yeah, absolutely. If there's any other questions, go ahead and send them. We have a few more minutes. I'm going to go through just my notes. I, of course, was trying to catch everything. Of course, I'm going to go back to our video, which, like I said earlier, I will be posting this video on Instagram, and we will be posting on YouTube. So you do have it for reference, and just spread the word, because it's such a rich series, and just please share with your family and friends, because I think this is so good not to share. So I think you sort of answered this, but I guess some things that came to my mind, sort of not playing the devil's advocate, but sort of, I know you talked about, people who succumb, and, some people who go to despair, and there's obviously tools and support for that. But I guess my question is, maybe you did answer that, but I guess I'm trying to figure out, we do believe that God, as Christians, God won't give us more than we can handle. But there are times, of course, if we're not tapping into those traits, like you mentioned, the 24 traits particularly, it does feel overwhelming. Yes. It does feel burnout, or all those things. So, and God forbid, we know extreme situations, and God forbid, all those, people who are extreme depression, or, so I just wonder, I guess my question is, is it scientifically proven, or like we could say by the evidence, that people, like, of course, again, as an Orthodox Christian, I believe this, but can we actually also say scientifically that people are inherent, have those strengths? It's just kind of, because, sometimes I feel like, you talked about people who thrive and prosper, and even through difficult homes, or war veterans. And obviously every situation, every person's life, and everything is just so different and unique and complicated. But I wonder, in certain situations where people just go through such difficulty, and yes, some come out of it and some just don't. And of course, God is a merciful God, and God is all full of grace. But I wonder, is everyone really equipped with the abilities to move on? I know I personally sometimes I guess as a mother, as a different, moving and changing careers, you feel like, am I equipped? How can I tap into those things? Besides, of course, getting the outside help and all those other things. So I don't know if that's sort of a question or,
Yeah. I kind of, and when you're in that midst of that despair, that's, like I said, that's when you want it to disappear immediately.
Yeah.
You want it in a microwave and you just want it gone, and in 2 minutes and it's done. And unfortunately, with challenges, it doesn't sometimes go away that quickly. And yes, there are things that people go through clinically, like deep depression or trauma, and all those things are valid and real.
Yeah.
So we don't want to deny the existence of those things either. And people do need treatment and can get treatment and can get help. But the point is, again, is that perseverance is to walk through those steps to get help, to not fall into despair, to slow down and start to problem solve, and to know that it will get solved. It's not going to get solved maybe overnight, but there is help out there. I think the despair comes when people just want the pain to stop. And of course, when you're going through that much trauma and stress, and I've seen it even in my own clients, they just want to give up. And that's to lessen the pain or to get rid of the pain. And that's understandable. But again, from the research perspective, the people that do thrive are trying to keep going, are trying to look for even the tiniest little nugget of hope, even a speck, and just to hold on to that speck. And hopefully it gets bigger with, every moving day and things like that. And just, and again, those Holocaust survivors that I researched, they would talk about just not wanting to give in. They didn't want to give in. They wanted to get out of the situation, tell their story. They wanted to find a purpose. They wanted to find their family, even if they didn't know if their family was alive. But they had something that they held on to. And the people that didn't, unfortunately, did succumb. And the people that did were more able to survive. So again, not taking away anything from any challenge that anyone is going through. That would be disrespectful and wrong. And so there are challenges. We're not minimizing them. We're not taking away from them. We're not saying they don't exist. But even if there's a speck, hold on to that speck of hope.
That's really beautiful. Thank you for that. I like with that, you said as well that there are, I think scientifically, you also said, which of course from our Christian perspective is like, oh my gosh, amazing how God created us, that if you, how did you say it? That the dopamine, once we are more resilient, it's like a snowball.
Yep.
Like, I think that's just, that's mind blowing.
Exactly.
Along obviously with gratitude and all those other things.
Yeah. The more perseverant we are, the more we have dopamine, the more perseverant we will become. So, and that leads to resilience. And so resilience is a snowball effect. And there is research on that as well. It's a chain reaction. Once it starts, it just keeps going.
It's amazing. Yeah. I've learned so much from this, and thank you for everything that you do and share. And like I said, I think for this platform, this ministry, there's so much we can do together, and I'm so excited. And for women's ministry too. And I think we do need more outlets, and I do hopefully foresee that we incorporate a lot of support as well through the ministry, and those who want to reach out privately or openly. And I've said this before. If I can offer you, obviously contact Dr. Agaibi if you would like to, connect with her. She's of course a trained therapist and clinical psychologist for many, many years, and has given hundreds of lectures everywhere. So please visit her page, visit her Instagram account. I've tagged her as well. She's been such a gift to us. Like I said, I have like a flood of thoughts and questions. So thank you, because you really enriched us and gave us hope, and also framed us that there is hope, even from a scientific perspective. I think sometimes that kind of, validates what we believe, and you're like, wow. And like you said, at one point you did say like the scientists are now kind of catching up, like St. Paul talks about the fruit of the Spirit, and they're like, oh yeah, gratitude is the most important thing. We're like, yeah, St. Paul talks about in everything give thanks. Which of course is so easy to say, right? But like you said, within even the Coptic tradition, we say thanks in everything, every prayer. So no, thank you again. And again, I encourage everyone, if you have any thoughts or comments, reach out to us. We want to work and build our communities for the strength and the resilience of all of us, truly, because we believe in this. Dr. Agaibi believes in this. Thank you for supporting us. Thank you for believing in us. Thank you for your time. I know you're a very busy woman and busy mom with many hats. So thank you again on a Wednesday evening.
Happy to do it anytime. Happy to be a part of this ministry. It is such a blessing. Yeah.
Thank you. It's a blessing for us. And I know I've learned a lot. And I'm excited to cover a lot more topics. And we'll definitely be in touch.
Sounds
great. Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone who's tuned in. Pray for us and have a good night. And we'll be starting new lectures too. We'll be in touch.
Sounds
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good night. Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Good night. Bye.